people in because they wouldn't have anything better to do. I'm going to wait right till 1. We had this yesterday, nobody was on here. And I'm sorry, I meant to call you several times, and literally it's like, it's not out to.
Hits the ditch line right there, above the building, seriously.
Anyway, I hadn't forgotten. Okay, my watch says 1:01, which means I am taking up too much of your time already. First off, good Saturday afternoon. Those of you that don't know me, I know a lot of you in the crowd. My name is Bart Warner. I'm the town manager. I want to thank you all very, very much for coming out on a Saturday. What I will tell you is we want to make sure that we provide you with as much information as possible about this Phase 2 boundary issue. I want to give you the opportunity to speak. I will respect your time, but I'm going to stay here as long as you have questions and comments. So, that said, I'd like to watch basketball at about 5:30, but that's the only thing I can do. And we had a meeting on Thursday night, and we had a pretty good turnout. Sheriff Miller was there. We had over 50 people, I'm sure. I didn't really count, but and the other thing too is I intend for this to be fairly informal. I mean, I want to hear what you have to say, but you don't have to get up and speak. You just kind of, what I'll say is you can raise your hand and I'll recognize you in order. But, good meeting Thursday. I have got a presentation that we put together to answer some of the questions we've anticipated. And I presented that Thursday and I'll present it tonight. I've tweaked it just a little bit based on some things we heard Thursday. But I do feel compelled to speak to something that was brought to my attention from Thursday's meeting. And that is the nature of some comments I made in response to a question about what might happen if this boundary adjustment does not go through. And recorded that meeting, we're recording this meeting too, because it needs to be out there for people who can't make it, and also so we can all go back and check the information that's shared and make sure it's right. But that meeting lasted for about 1 hour and 45 minutes. It's on our website, townofbedford.info. If you click on public meeting, it'll take you that way. At about 1 hour and 35 into that meeting at that mark was when we had that discussion again. Somebody asked, well, what happens if this doesn't happen? And I began to try to answer that. And while I was doing that, there were a couple other folks talking, and candidly, I got a little sidetracked. So what I want to say both in response to that and to begin with here as a good starting point is part of this whole process is that the town of Bedford is prepared to extend its full range of services to people in the Phase 2 area if we take you in. If the adjustment does not happen, we won't. Now, when I say that, I'm talking about kind of common, regular services. It's everything we do. But the question I was asked was in the context of public safety. And I don't think I gave a very clear answer to that, so I want to do that now. When I say we won't provide public safety service if we don't take you in, I'm thinking on the level of animal control, things like that. And I know this is done with groundhog drives. What I want to tell you is if we don't take you in, don't be too upset if you call us and ask us to do that and we say we won't do it. That's the context. Now, there was a comment made about severe emergency cases, and that's what kind of threw me. When you watch the meeting starting at 1 hour and 35 minutes, you'll see me visibly react. I will tell you, at 1 hour and 38 minutes, I made the statement that in terms of emergency calls, we have to respond. So let me explain what that means. Even if we do not take people in, if town police or town fire get a call outside the town limits, and it relates to a matter of threats to life or personal property, the expectation is that they're going to respond. And I say that as much for the benefit of existing citizens, just so they know. And there's no question about that. Because that's a moral imperative. And to suggest that we simply wouldn't turn a blind eye to our neighbors in crisis, that's not going to happen. So I just want to offer that clarification. The other thing, and this is kind of part of the whole thing here, my role in this whole process is administrative. I work at the will and pleasure of town council, and I'm here on their behalf to share and receive information related to this proposal that they put forward. And also, I and my staff are responsible to implement this thing either way. So if we go forward with the boundary adjustment, we have to provide the service. We have a plan to do that. If we don't, we have a plan to deal with that as well. And we have to develop those contingencies both ways. What I will tell you while we're all here together is if we do go forward with this as staff is doing things, please understand that we are following the directions we've been given, and our folks are not looking to aggravate people. I know everybody's aggravated, and that makes perfect sense. But the other thing I want to tell you too is I'm not here to advocate for or against the boundary adjustment because I'm affected by it too. Professionally, I'm going to have a responsibility one way or the other. It's very important for me that everybody understands as much about it as possible because it has direct impact. And with that said, I'm going to begin with my presentation. I'm going to try to go through it quickly because I want you to have this information. I'll touch on some highlights, but I really am interested in what you have to say. So the whole reason why we're here goes back to the city's reversion to town status. Some of you remember that process. Some of you might not mean anything at all, but from 1968 to 2013, Bedford was an independent city, which means it was located within the county, it was the county seat, but it was not part of the county. And I say that, it sounds nonsensical to me too. 2013, we changed that. As part of that, there's a lot of things that towns do as compared to cities, and annexation immediately became an issue. In Virginia, towns can annex property. Cities cannot. good reason for that, because if they're doing that, they're definitely at the expense of the county. So the state's put regulations in effect. But when we talked about going through this reversion process, the first question on a lot of people's minds is, well, is the town going to annex property? And so we entered into a discussion with Bedford County at that point. And I'll explain more about the outcome of that, but ultimately, when the decisions about entering the agreement on reversion, which involved the county and the city, were made, there were incentives provided that were particularly important to both parties. On our side, annexation was one of those incentives. And the state basically said the town could annex property and expand its boundaries by passing an ordinance. And that's different than the usual process. And that was attractive to council at the time. On the county side, the state said, based on the city's composite index, the state will provide funding to the county based on that. And the outcome of that was the county began to receive $6 million a year based on that calculation. Now, both of those things have a shelf life of 15 years, starting in 2013. And what I'll tell you is that basically that's a contract that was entered into between the city of Bedford, the county, and the Commonwealth of Virginia. And lo and behold, here in 2023, we're dealing with the administrative parts of it. This is the map of those areas we talked about for annexation, and I know it's not real easy to read, but I'll try to orient you. Thank you, Debbie. When we talked about annexation, we'll say town. The town and the county agreed to a three-phased approach. And I just want to show you what the areas of those phases. The old city limits are this part here, and people probably recognize that. In fact, some of the maps still show that, I think. The phase one areas are these areas shown in yellow. They're pretty easy to see. And those largely consisted of commercial areas that were the subject of a revenue sharing agreement that the city and the county had at the time. Then there are a couple other spots. This is the old city landfill. This is Liberty Lake Park. You'll notice that even when we were a city, we owned property that was outside city limits. Then there was the Oakwood Villas project here, but that's phase one. Then there was the next phase, phase two, and it's what we're here talking about today. And the original boundary of that, I'm going to kind of start here and swing around. I hope it's easy to see, but it probably is not. This is the Bison printing property on the west end of town, out above Winona. That would come in. This is a little otter as it goes up to basically 43 Peaks Road. That was slated to come in. Then this area north of town, the city limits at that point, was slated to come in. This is 43 going up by the Redlands property, which is how we refer to it. This is a power line. And look, I'm going to tell you, I was around when that was discussed. I don't know why anybody thought that was a good idea. But anyway. The power line was approved as the original boundary of phase two. This is Big Island Highway. This is where Liberty High School is around here. Then we came down, we picked up the Little Otter River again, down to the Norfolk and Western Railroad. Beyond that, there's a neighborhood here, Stratford Drive and Heritage Court. Then there's Town and Country, which is here. That's phase two. The rest of this hatched area is phase three. And that goes from this power line to Fancy Farm Road, the golf course is up here. Then there's this area out beyond the landfill, out Belltown Road and that way. Then you access it the other way from Shiloh Church Road. Then there's a couple of spots here on the western end as well. So those are the boundaries. Next, I kind of want to tell you what the significance of those is. I mentioned phase one was formerly a revenue sharing area. That came in immediately upon reversion on July 1st, 2013. That happened automatically. That was mostly commercial, but I will tell you we added about 315 residents through that process. The part we're talking about here is phase two, and the part of the agreement that we're referring to here says, and the reason we're here today talking about this, is that any and all parcels in phase two that have not been taken in shall automatically become part of the town 10 years after the effective date of the phase one boundary adjustment. That date will be July 1st, 2023. Now, shall automatically become part upon adoption of an ordinance. So, first question on a lot of people's minds is this a done deal? I will tell you, technically, no, it is not. It says automatically, but council has to adopt an ordinance. And I'm going to talk more about that process in a moment, too. Phase 3 represents the remainder of that area. And that was as far 10 years ago as anybody thought the city of Bedford ever should grow, particularly within 15 years. The town has the right to annex that area by ordinance within the next 5 years, but there are conditions. And the conditions are that that area has to be developing in an urban manner. And that's defined in the agreement. What I'm going to tell you is 5 years ahead of that, that's not going to happen. Based on those standards, there's not the development there that's going to trigger. So phase 3 is not going to happen, or if it does, it's going to be against my recommendation and probably anybody else who's in here, but it's not really on the table. So this is what we're going to deal with, and we'll be done one way or the other. Did want to notice though too, from our side, we've been talking about this for quite a while. Obviously, when phase 1 came in, we immediately started talking about what we need to do in phase 2. And then we were thinking about phase 3, and we quickly figured out then, that's not going to happen. So we've had a lot of public discussions, and 2 in particular I want to reference our comprehensive plan. We adopted that about 6 years ago, and I'm going to put this presentation on our website too, by the way, so you can click these links directly. There's a whole section 2A, that talks about what we're talking about tonight. Now, the other thing from a staff level is, again, we're responsible for implementing this, so we need to have a really good idea of what it looks like. And so we've kind of done some gut checks along the way. One of the most recent ones we did was this past August. At that regular meeting of town council, we discussed the phase 2 boundary area. And staff talked about what we thought were the challenges there. And we all talked about making some changes in that boundary, which council did approve. And also we kind of asked them too, are we sure that we're proceeding, because we've got to make preparations such as ordering trash carts, which we've got about 500, 600 sitting down in Public Works right now, ready to go. We had to order a trash truck. That should be here next month. And we had to hire 3 folks to work it. What I will tell you though is, again, we're prepared for any contingency. Those things will be used regardless of what happens. And they were needed, and we'll address that. Anyway, we talked about changing the boundary. We asked for that. Council unanimously said, yeah, let's move forward based on this revised map. And hopefully this is easier to read. I'm just going to kind of highlight the changes. Originally, this area here behind the old Elks home and the farm there, along the Little Otter River, was supposed to be included. Council and staff kind of determined that didn't make a whole lot of sense. Accessibility and providing service is going to be an issue. The other thing we quickly talked about was, okay, using the power line as a boundary might be okay in places like North Carolina, but it doesn't make sense here. So we immediately came back to that, and we basically, council decided to keep the Redland property included in the proposed area, but to back the line down to the Little Otter River. So originally this area across from Liberty High School was slated to be in phase 2, but that was changed. This area did not change a whole lot. And also Stratford Drive is pretty much the same. Town and Country is still proposed to come in, although we did note that there's a piece of farmland here that's in the Wolfen family, I believe, that didn't make sense to include for service provision. So one of the things I'll point out too, and those of you who live there already know, I'm not telling you anything you don't know, is most of the remaining areas, Bison, North Hills, Town and Country, Stratford Drive, are physically located in such a manner that you can't get in or out without coming through the town. And that's been a significant part of the discussion about these boundaries. Now, I will tell you that this part between Big Island Highway and Norfolk and Southern Railroad is different. It has a really different set of challenges. Council has decided to keep that in because that's been identified as a future growth area. that's the direction we've been given. Just wanted everybody to understand that. And I'm going to come back to that in a minute too. The effect of this kind of in the cosmic view, I mentioned we added 315 people back in 2013. The town is actually growing. We're seeing some redevelopment. You all probably know what I'm talking about with some of the revitalized buildings and our efforts to get some business in. Let me comment on that a second too, though. There is a goal to attract some growth to the community. I will tell you that that's got a limit to it in our opinion. We think Bedford needs to have the ability to grow and attract things like retail businesses, and those typically see higher populations. This is largely Bart Warner's opinion, but I think staff and council are with me on this. We don't want to grow in such a way that Bedford is not recognizable. We don't want to grow in such a way that we're choking on traffic. We don't have any desire to be a big city. So our thought was 10,000 in population would be about as much as we might accommodate in this expanded boundary. Just so you know, for sake of reference. Right now, we're right about 6,700 people. If this goes through, we'll add about 1,000 people. And I base that on, there's about 500 households that are involved in the area, and the census says there are 2 people per household. Now, if you come in, what do you get? Well, what you get first off is more taxes. Just being completely candid. Town residents pay taxes to the town and to the county. And part of the, I'll call it complication and problem is both the town and the county collect 2 of the same revenue sources, real estate tax and personal property tax. For our purposes, real estate tax is it's the largest individual line item, but it's $1.7 million out of our overall general fund budget, which this year is $11 million. I will tell you that's going to come down in our next budget proposal because that included a CDBG project. So it'll be 1.7, or if we take in this area, we'll add about 400,000, so it'd be 2 million on 10 million, just for sake of reference. That's the source of our revenue. The other big sources for us are meals tax, which is kind of surprising, but we're also keeping an eye on. And occupancy tax has been up with the hotels we have, and we have a boutique hotel coming into town. We were kind of surprised by that too. And we have other sources. VDOT provides funding, which I'm going to mention that in a second too. But I know you're very interested in the real estate tax rate because that's something that would impact you as of July 1st. Right now, the town's real estate tax rate is 31 cents for $100 of assessed value. I will tell you that in the budget we're proposing for fiscal year 23-24, which we're going to talk about next month, that rate is projected to be 29 cents. Now, that also includes the reassessment numbers, and we know there were significant increases in property values there, which are going to drive up tax bills. But in addition to this 29 cents, we will also pay the county tax rate, which is currently 50 cents, but I understand that's coming down too as a result of reassessment. Our personal property tax rate, the way we collect that is different. Basically, the way we go about it is we do get some funding from the state for car tax relief. And that's about $280,000 a year of revenue from the state. Otherwise, we collect the local tax, and it amounts to $126,000. We give a credit of $20,000 basically on each individual piece of equipment that's taxable. So that means if you have a vehicle that's not worth $20,000, you're not going to get a bill from us. I do feel compelled to give credit to the County Board of Supervisors. You know, they recently issued a rebate in response to that, which is much appreciated by everybody. But that's something that we've always done and will continue to do. Now, if you have a vehicle that's worth more than $20,000, you will pay $1.06 per $100 of assessed value above $20,000. I also need to point out something that, correct myself from Thursday. Our neighbor Jim Swanson had asked me about farm equipment. The only eligible things there are things that DMV licenses, so there's basically vehicles, campers, boats. We made a note of that though. The impact of this on farming and agriculture is something we know we need to talk about. This is kind of a breakdown of what you get for 31 cents, and it's just kind of by share of that real estate tax. So a big chunk of that goes to public works. Next biggest expense is public safety. You can see the categories. We have a spot here showing what the impact is on a home that's valued at $200,000. That's an average number. If anybody has a home that's assessed that low, I'll be surprised. So I don't know how germane that example is for you personally. So let me talk a little bit about the services we provide. And I want to go quickly. You see them behind you later. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to explain that. The Public Works Department takes care of mainly everything we own. That includes streets, that includes buildings. They provide snow removal. They maintain our parks. Sidewalks are a big discussion, and that kind of goes back to our comprehensive plan. And I will tell you what the town's approach to that is. The comp plan states that our goal is to install sidewalks on every single street within town limits. Well, that's what it says. We intend to install sidewalks on every single street. If we expand our boundaries, that'll include that as well. I will tell you that our strategy mostly is to start at the beginning with the center of town, which is Bridge Main, work our way out. But when we have access to grants, we will do things like what we did on Burks Hill Road, which was funded with VDOT grant. Or if there's a demand for services outside of that inside-out plan, we'll address that. I will tell you that if you want sidewalks, and we'll need you to tell us that as far as our comp plan process, but I'll come to that. We have a plan to provide that through another VDOT grant right now, but that's a discussion we need to have with you on the other side of adjustment, boundary adjustment. Now, I'm going to be honest with you, that goal of getting sidewalks on every single street within town, very unlikely to happen while I'm here. And when I say that while I'm on this earth, it's going to take us a while. When I say it's going to take us a while to do that, I mean every single street. And our biggest challenge there, frankly, isn't money so much as finding labor, which is a common theme in today's economy too. So just want to make you aware that that's a goal. When you hear about sidewalks, that's why it's such a big deal for us. It's in the comp plan. Been a lot of discussion about the solid waste services we provide. Here's a list of everything we do. The way we charge for that is a separate fee. That's a $25 monthly fee currently, and that's on your utility bill. And there are a few reasons we do it that way instead of charging you taxes, one of which is the nature of the service itself. The reason we do it this way with curbside services is because the town code, state regulations, our regional waste plan dictate how we're doing that. What I will tell you though on a practical basis is that if there are certain situations where you don't want the service and we are not really able to provide it to you in a practical or safe manner, we can make an exception because it's a fee. And I'll give an example of that from phase one. There were a couple of houses right on 460 that came into town then. And in order to serve those places safely, and I'm talking about for our employees and for motorists on the highway, we would have had to come onto the people's property, and they told us they didn't want us to do that. As a result, in those cases, we are not providing that service, but they're also not being charged a fee. There's a caveat to that for us, though. If they ever change their mind, we're still obligated to do it, and we'll have to figure out how. So we are aware that there are solid waste services out in these areas that would be coming in, and that they're good services. But part of this is we're compelled to do what we do based on the regulations we have. The next biggest source of funding for us is public safety. Fire is defined as a town department by the town code, but it also has a direct relationship with Bedford County Fire and Rescue. And I'll mention came up Thursday, and I'm going to mention some of the benefits the county provides as part of that are, the county does contribute to purchasing apparatus. I think they do that for all companies within the county based on schedule. And that's a generous benefit. We appreciate that. They also pay companies per call based on certain criteria. So, again, the fire department is a town department, but it's also attached to the county in such a way that the service area really goes beyond the current town limits, and I think about 60% of their current calls are technically outside of town limits now. Now, one benefit of the level of service there is our ISO rating, and that's the Insurance Services Corporation, which rates every single fire department in the country based on their ability to respond very quickly in a fire. The highest rating is 1, the lowest rating is 10. I think fewer than 1% of all rated companies in the country have a 1 rating. We currently have a 3 rating. That's pretty good for us. When I say there are those that have a 1 rating, those are typically staffed by career fire services throughout the organization. We had been at a rating of 4 recently, but we've gotten down to a 3 based on some of our investments in personnel that we got credit for. I will tell you that Chief Stone and I continue to talk about what we can do to get down to a 2. And the reason we want to do that is that has benefits for homeowners. You ideally should get some kind of break on your homeowner's insurance based on our ability to provide these ratings. You'll need to consult your insurance carrier about that check. But maybe they don't know that the ISO rating's 3, and maybe that's a benefit. The other component of public safety is police. And I didn't mention this the other night, but I'll mention it tonight. I'm glad we're recording it. When a reversion occurred, there was a discussion about whether or not the town would continue to provide police service, or simply just, get out of that business and allow the sheriff's department to continue doing what they're doing, which is great. The decision made then was to continue it, even though it's a significant cost for us, but there was a perception that having a town police department had some tangible benefits, one of which is because we're 8.7 square miles, and that's our entire focus, we have a little bit quicker response time to calls if you need emergency help. Now, I'm going to go back. That's just a matter of scale, and that's compared to the sheriff's office. Sheriff's office provides excellent service, and we appreciate that. The difference is just in scale. It's real easy to get there quickly if you're only covering 8 square miles. Sheriff Miller's covering 700 and how many?
95.
795 square miles. But I'm listing the things that the town does. We do some similar things in the county, but what I'll tell you is we do them in different ways. And part of that is driven by our accreditation, which tells us we have to meet certain criteria to keep it. And I'll come back to that, I'm sure you'll have questions. The next biggest source is administration. Hey, surprise, with the government. We have people like me whose job is to basically make sure that we comply with all standards and laws, that we keep the bills paid, and that we keep revenue in the coffers. I will tell you, just in case you're curious, currently the town has a general fund balance of $3.9 million. When I say that, that's discretionary money. About 10 years ago, when we reverted, that figure was $2.9 million. So I'm going to recognize you, Tony. You made an excellent point in discussion of a proposed project that the town really needs to save some money towards some projects. What I'll tell you is we have been doing that. Now, $3.9 million, we wouldn't spend all that on one project because that wouldn't be responsible. And we don't know that that's enough to cover things, but that's a philosophy we do embrace. The other thing is, again, my role. I'm working at the will and pleasure of the town council. What I'll tell you that means is I don't have a term of office. They can vote me out anytime if a majority of them decide that Warner needs to go. I will thank you very much for allowing me to serve you, and I'll move on. I'm just saying that in case you didn't know. But my relationship is that I work for town council. The other direct report the town council has is the town attorney, and then there's the clerk that they also supervise. The other thing I'll tell you is that all department heads work at the will and pleasure of the town manager. And we all know that when we come here. So. The next biggest expense for us is community development. Again, I'm not going to bore you with too many details. I'll put asterisks by these things though too, because there's always been a question about duplication of services. And I want to tell you up front that we know these two are basically duplicated. And when I say that, we pay town taxes to support a building code officer here. We also pay county taxes to the county building office. Also, economic development is the same way. There's a county economic development office, and there's a town economic development office. That is a duplication. We pay for it. On that front, I will tell you though that, again, the level of service that the county provides us is really good. Our ability to partner with them on things has been beneficial. Most recently, there's been an announcement that we got a major grant award called Go Virginia. The application process for that requires that you have 2 separate jurisdictions endorse it at the beginning. We had that because Bedford County was able to endorse the town. And we also help endorse their applications when we can. So there's an overlap. We're paying double, but again, the perception is that that's a benefit. Y'all also know you get your electric service from the town. The town has its own electric utility. My understanding of the history of that is mainly because over 100 years ago, there wasn't going to be an investor-owned utility that was going to provide a service. So the city fathers then built a hydroelectric plant on the James River. On the Amherst County side, we actually pay real estate tax to Amherst County on that, by the way, and ran the lines down to the town. So one of the significant things about that is, while over 60% of our customers are in the current town limits and right around here, including the area we're talking about, over 70% of our maintenance effort is outside town limits. Most of that is maintaining the line between here and Big Island. A lot of that is trying to keep right-of-ways cleared in some difficult areas. I'll come back to that more if you have questions about that. There have been some questions about water and sewer service here too. And a few people in North Hills have asked, will we get sewer service as a result of that? Well, the first thing I'm going to tell you is the town is no longer involved in that business at all. The town and the county went together in 2014 to create the Bedford Regional Water Authority, which provides those services basically within Bedford County, which includes the town and some of this area. The main reason we did that then was because of drought issues. Previously, the town got all its water from the Stony Creek Reservoir, and as somebody who remembers that, the quality was fantastic. Probably might have been the best water in the world, with apologies to the Fiji water people. But the problem we had was that was very susceptible to drought. And in the 20 years prior to 2014, and I was here for 14 of those, we came really close a few times to having mandatory water restrictions. And that's, look, we are the government, we try to be neighborly. We don't want to tell you you can't use the service that you're paying for Pete's sake. So when the water authority was created, one of the first things they did was run a line from Smith Mountain Lake to connect to the town. And while reasonable minds might differ about the quality of that water, and I'm probably with you on whichever side we might talk about, that did eliminate the drought problem. That was one of the main reasons we did it. Other than that, the Water Authority has a crew dedicated to capital projects in and near town. What we're hearing is we have a lot of old lines that they inherited and they got to fix them. And they're working on that, we appreciate it. The other thing we can do though too is, while we don't provide the service, we can participate in capital projects. And currently, I don't know if there's anybody here from Town and Country. Currently, we use some of our American Rescue Plan Act money to make improvements to the sewer line in Town and Country. That's happening. That was funded by the town. So I guess I'm going to circle back to, I know that a lot of you have public water. I don't think there's is there any public sewer out in North Hills? I didn't think so. Some of you don't have either. Again, my mother-in-law used to live on Vista Circle. First off, the question is, will we get water and sewer service as part of this adjustment? The answer is no, you will not. The next question is, can we get that service? And what I'm going to tell you is, we want to engage with you to find out if you want that, and then we'll talk to the water authority about how that works. If we get that far, how that works is the water authority is going to run the lines and charge you to use it. To recover their costs. There is water, yeah. Yes, correct. I want to make sure there was no sewer. I knew there was water in parts. The other thing, we are governed by a town council that is comprised of people who live within the town limits, who are willing to run and serve and be abused sometimes. I'll just kind of say that. Any bona fide resident of the town is eligible to serve on town council, meaning if you become part of the town limits, you certainly can run for town council. In addition to that, we also have some other appointed boards where, frankly, we have trouble finding people sometimes. Planning Commission reviews development projects, zoning, makes recommendations on that. Redevelopment and Housing Authority, their focus right now is on trying to fix up some of the housing stock we got that's a little challenged. I'll just use that term. That group is the one who got the Community Development Block Grant. They also have a grant program of their own where they provide assistance to a certain level for people to fix up their houses. The Economic Development Authority, the town has its own and the county has its own. Those two groups work together brilliantly. In fact, we have a county EDA member here. That relationship, that is dynamite. Both those groups are focused on, well, what we said.
We're better together.
Yes. I came here in 2000 and I remember Rubitex. What I'm going to tell you, this is kind of a philosophical point of view. I believe they employed about 1,000 people. I'm going to use that figure. And when they left, that was a big blow for this community. And not just to say the community. The biggest problem too is that it really didn't have much to do with anything happening in Bedford, but that's my opinion. I should keep it so part of what we've been doing ever since that time is trying to account for that. And the Economic Development Authority works to attract businesses anyway, to make Bedford attractive for business. If we can ever get another 1,000 employer business, we'll take it. I'm saying that. But, and Christy's making a face, and I'm going to agree with you, that's going to have huge impact on the community. That's going to have big changes. So, in case you're asking, if we have the opportunity to bring in a Toyota plant, we're certainly going to talk about that. But what we'd like to do at our level is replace those 1,000 jobs we lost with 50 different businesses. If we could get 50 businesses that employ 20 people, and that, again, that's just kind of a philosophical goal, but that's what I mentioned. I mentioned the Water Authority. We appoint 2 people to the board of directors there. So if you're interested in that, we would be glad to have your services. Now, I mentioned we had a meeting on Thursday, which again was great. I wanted to share some of the things we heard there. And the first one's a universal truth. Nobody wants to pay more taxes. Amen. We understand. Unfortunately, part of this thing for the folks taking in is you would be paying significantly more taxes. And I say significantly, we're going to be completely honest about it. There were some other things that came up, and I want to mention that we did follow up on that. One of the things that's important to us is if we do take areas in, we don't want to interrupt the quiet enjoyment that's already occurring. And some of our regulations, frankly, may be a little bit of a problem for that. One of the things is restrictions on burning within town limits. That's covered under the town code. What I will tell you is the code says it's up to the jurisdiction of the town fire chief. I think what that means is before you burn, you need to call Todd Stone and ask him. Whereas if you're outside the town, you don't have to go through that step. I don't want to speak for Todd, but beyond the fact that you would have to do that, I don't think he will be difficult to work with. But again, that's his purview. But that came up Thursday and we looked into it. The other thing is the impact of our zoning, and I think this is more of an issue in that area between Big Island Highway and Forest Road. That land, there's a lot of it that's agricultural. Now, I mentioned this Thursday, our intent with our zoning is to apply the least intensive use, which is, for us is R1 single family. We do allow agricultural uses by right in R1, but based on what we heard Thursday night, we need to visit that and make sure that we are not causing problems for anybody that might be taken in. What I will tell you up front is, if you're doing something on your property when we take you in that's not allowed, you're grandfathered. The other thing I'll tell you, and I haven't said this to Ms. Zirkle yet, but we need to look at our zoning ordinance to see if we can create a district that allows these agricultural uses. We may need our own agricultural district. We're in the process of rewriting our zoning ordinance, so, sorry, that just came up from Thursday. But that goes to the point too of, the protection of agricultural and farming activity in general. I'm aware of the dynamic of people who farm and make their living off their property, that they don't really have a 401k. They work really hard. Everything they get is what they generate on their own property. So an additional tax is a burden right off. Again, just speaking very candidly. The other thing too is how we view and relate to that, because if you're farming and you want to continue to farm, and that would be wonderful because it might be the most noble profession on the face of the earth, we need to find a way to offset the impact of that. One thing I will tell you is, some of you are familiar with the land use tax exemption offered by the state. We do offer that in town also. So just because you come into town doesn't mean that goes away. That would be applicable to your town taxes the same way it would the county. But we are sensitive to the fact of, your land is your property and your plans for it are the most important. So again, I haven't talked to council about this. I've thought about it since Thursday night. For those folks who want to keep doing what they're doing and really aren't demanding a lot of services, we do need to find some relief for those people. And if they do want to sell their property and subdivide it, that's something we've already taken into consideration, but I'm going to tell you, I don't know that anybody said that's a desirable thing. So that's something that came up Thursday. We know we need to talk more about that, and we've started that discussion after Thursday. The other thing is, the town has regulations dealing with firearms within town limits that will impact hunting that's taking place currently on some of these properties and target you. The question is, can I continue to target you? And I think the answer currently is no. We didn't realize that. We've already started talking to the police chief about what we need to do to manage that in a way that's practical for the areas where it's occurring and not bothering anybody. The other thing is the value that you perceive of town services. And look, that's subject to your opinion. One of the things we did here Thursday night, and some of you may tell us again, is you're satisfied with what you got, you don't think the town adds any value, and you really don't want it. And we do appreciate that input. What I will tell you is, if this goes forward and you're incorporated, we're still going to be obligated to provide those for you. So the challenge we're going to have is to make it worth your while. But we understand coming in that this is it's a big change, it's a big expense. We understand that you're angry about it. I'd say we understand it. That's perfectly reasonable. The other thing that came up Thursday night was, is it possible to delay this? And the short answer is yes, it can be delayed. The longer answer is, the town and the county and the Commonwealth, I think, will have to work that out. But it's possible. But the other thing I want to point out to you is, back in 2013, when we were talking about this phased approach, there was discussion about taking you folks in 2013. And at that point, the town decided, that's going to be a big change, it's going to be a big impact for folks. So the thinking was, if we wait 10 years, people will have an opportunity to make other plans. That didn't work out too well because it didn't occur to us that you didn't know what was happening. But I just want you to be aware of that. The other thing we heard, and look, we all agree with this is not a great time for anybody to be talking about additional expenses. The economic challenges are real. Everything I see and hear, and if you hear something contradictory, you tell me, is that we are at the front end of a recession that's probably going to last a pretty long time. we are aware of that, and we're sensitive to it. So we've heard that. This is the last thought I have, and then I'm going to shut up and listen to you folks. But the next steps have dates attached to them. First off, let me mention, Town Council meets the second and the fourth Tuesday of every month at 7 p.m. in this room. And we would love to have absolutely anybody join us. Most of the time we don't have anybody. There's Ms. Layton on Peak Street who just started coming, which is great. If you can't make it, just like we're doing today, we live stream our meetings and we record them. But again, I'm going back to it really troubles me the fact that there's just not a lot of knowledge about this. The best way to find out what the town's doing is to view or attend the town council meeting. So I just want to throw that invitation out there. On April 11th, at that meeting, town council is going to have a public hearing. Well, I'm about to say, in a few minutes, I'm going to give you the opportunity to ask questions that I'll try to answer. If you want to share opinions, we'll listen to that too. But April 11th is your meeting to come. Council is going to listen to you directly. I would encourage you to come. If you can't attend and you want to submit comments, we'll receive those. But on April 11th, Town Council is going to have a public hearing at their regular meeting. On May 9th, Town Council is going to take action on the ordinance. That's going to be the date that the decision is made. And let me speak to a question that came up about why these dates. We do have other things going on, one of which is the adoption of next year's budget, which we're going to present at our meeting Tuesday, our proposal. But April 11th, we're going to have the public hearing. We're going to listen to you folks and analyze what that means for the town's costs as well if we took you in. At the next meeting, which will be April 25th, there's going to be a budget work session for council. And I say that, sorry, CG, I think both those meetings are going to be pretty long. And so but they relate to each other too. So it's good to have the public hearing and to be focused on that and make sure we hear things. Then it's good to meet the next time to talk about those impacts on the budget as well as the rest of the budget. Then on May 9th, we'll take the action, and that's going to be informed by what you tell us, what the impact on the budget is to us, and the other considerations that were in the original agreement. Assuming that action is taken on May 9th to bring you folks into town limits, on July 1st, 2023, we will provide all town services to all citizens. We will, again, going back to what I said at the beginning, we will fully extend all existing services to you. You'll be entitled to it. Now, because of the population change triggered by this action, if it happens, there will be a special election in November in which all 7 seats are going to be open. So again, if you're interested in running for council, that's a really good opportunity to follow up on that. After that, the following year, there's a regular election. The way the special election works is the top 3 voters will basically get the remainder of a 3-year term, and the next 4 will get the remainder of a 1-year term. Those folks will have to run again in 2024. So what I'm telling you is, and this is a political discussion and I'm not a politician, there are 2 opportunities to impact the majority of who's on council coming up in 23 and 24. We have a website put out where we'll post the video of this meeting, we'll post this presentation. We've posted a lot of information. The voluntary settlement agreement is a humongous document. That spells out most of what's going on and why. So it's on there. If you've got the time, please go read it. But the other thing is, if you have other questions, please come talk to me at any time. I maintain an open door policy, and I'm happy to provide information if I can. If I don't know the answer, I'll tell you that too. But please stay engaged. Make sure you get the information you need. And if you don't have the information you need, please let us know. With that said, I am now going to shut up and entertain any questions or comments you have. And I'll do that. We have a small group, so I'll just kind of recognize you. One, you can raise your hand. You don't have to get up. Just want you to be comfortable. Yes, sir.
I've got one question. I know I got a copy of a map, I believe it today. Now, I live on 122, just outside the town of Bedford. The once big island. I live on the town side of Lavelle.
Yes, sir. Mr. Combs.
Yes. Okay, and and I'm listening to a lot of these things. I'm not 100% sure where the, new proposed boundary is. I think it's a little odd, but I wasn't sure.
That is correct. The new proposed boundary is a little out of room. Let me get back to it. Yeah, that's probably helpful for these discussions. Okay, good. Yeah, Mr. Toms, I've talked to your neighbor quite a bit too.
Oh, okay.
Lovely lady. Yeah, you're right there.
Okay, because my son lives on one side, I live on the other side, so.
So if your son's on the other side, he's not gonna be part of the town, but you'll be.
He'll be in the county.
That's what that would mean,
Okay.
yes, sir.
And as far as services, we really don't need town services. Now, I don't feel that will be a sidewalk put in out there, but I've walked that road one time in 33 years. When I built my house, I built outside of the town because I didn't want to be in the town. That's 33 years ago. And, yeah, I've been very, very happy to, where I am, I can see the town limits, but I don't want to be in the town. And I see a lot of these other things like hunting, for instance. We can hunt on my property right now. Last week, I saw 19 deer at one time on my property, so then I know that there's an overpopulation. So,
And I agree with you, and I made a really inappropriate comment at the last meeting about that.
so
Anybody who can, well, deer are kind of a nuisance.
right.
They're also very tasty.
And I have a few other thoughts, but that's.
No, but the other thing too is, I'll respect your time, but feel free to tell us everything that's on your mind that you're willing to share. I'll stay as long as you want to do that. Thank you, Mr. Thompson.
Hey, Bart. Okay, so for the taxes, so county tax right now is what, 50 cents?
It is, but I'm sure that's coming down.
Okay, so we would pay that county tax on top of this county tax,
Yes, ma'am.
which is the 31 cents.
It's 31 cents currently.
29, so we're looking at 80 cents per $100.
Yes, Tanya, that's correct. Yes.
Okay, then my second thing is, with like the trash collection and stuff, is that gonna be optional for us? Because, I mean, we don't use an outside service to take care of that ourselves, recycling and so forth, and that's $300 for the year that we would like to save, and obviously would go towards this extra tax.
Yeah, that is a good point. I'm going to go back to our solid waste plan. If there's a practical or safety reason that we can't serve you, it's very easy for us to identify that exception, but if we find that we can pick up there on Vista Circle, we probably would be able to. I think we are obligated to provide the service and charge you for it, and I really hate saying that, but that's my understanding.
Bart,
Yes, ma'am.
business license,
Oh, yeah.
tools tax, not in the county property. But I think they will be.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Christy. So the town has both of those on the books, and when we reverted from city to town, we adjusted the rates on both of those. We still have machinery and tools tax on the books, and it's like, I don't know how many decimals are in that, but it's .0000. We set it up so that it didn't go away completely. It's still on the books, but it's zero. There's no effect. Business privilege license tax, there's actually two components to that payment. One is the application fee, which is $30. And in addition to that, you pay a tax depending on your business class, and that's outlined in state code. We did away with the tax, but we still charge the $30 application fee, and we still collect business license. And that was a discussion that was deliberate at the time of reversion. We talked about maybe just getting rid of that altogether, but what I'll tell you my recollection is they thought that having a list of businesses that we kind of recognized was a good thing. In the upcoming budget proposal, we are talking about bringing back the beef poll tax on retail businesses that generate sales of $3 million and over. Those are basically large corporate retailers, and I won't name them, but no, I'm talking about.
The other thing that was triggered when you got a city business license or a town business license at the time was that you had to get a different electric service, which was extremely expensive.
We do have demand meters for a lot of our commercial businesses.
And that was a requirement, because I was encouraged that my husband, who's a contractor, never opened his business when we lived in the town.
I wasn't aware of that, thank you. Hey, okay.
Just bringing up some history.
Good, no, that, for my benefit purposes, that's a great benefit, I think I was aware of that. If that's a written policy, we'll follow up on it. If it's not a written-
It was at the time.
Okay. And if it's not a written policy, then it probably isn't a policy, so.
Streetlights in North Hills.
Thank you, yeah, that's an excellent issue. First off, I'll tell you, we discovered that there's streetlights out on Peakland Court, which we found rather perplexing. Apparently the developer put them in and they were the candlestick lights that we were using at the time. And currently, the folks whose houses are in front of those are paying for those. I'm speaking that kind of to answer your question in a roundabout way. If we take that area in, I think those are actually in the right of way. If we take in Peakland Court, the town's gonna take over coverage of that payment because we provide street lights in the right of way generally as an urban standard. Now, for North Hills, that's one of those, you need to tell us if you want them discussions. Because I live in the middle of town and I will tell you, the benefit of street lights is, okay, I can see who's in front of my house. The downside is it lights up half my side yard. And I like dark sky myself, so North Hills where we don't have them currently, if you want them, we will find a way to provide them, but that's an up to you kind of discussion. Does that answer the question?
It really isn't up to me.
Well, we're also, I mentioned streetlights too. Now, there are also dusk to dawn lights that people can put on their property. We need to address the impact of that too, because if you live next door to somebody and they have a dusk to dawn light that you don't want, we need to find a way to prevent that from being a problem.
My concern in North Hills is the pedestrian traffic. There's a kind of volume of
Oh, yeah.
pedestrian traffic in North Hills.
Yes.
And of course, the sidewalks, we've already said, would not be in place anytime soon.
If you want the sidewalks in North Hills, then we're ready to do that.
They should. Was there some I really haven't slowed down for?
No, thank you, that's,
I got, what about the police department? How do y'all figure how many policemen you need? How many do you have?
we have 24 sworn officers and I think we have 3 civilian employees. Well, I said we have 24 positions.
6,000,
6, 7.
Yeah. The way we've been having that conversation though is based on the shifts that they cover. And right now I think we're running 3 shifts. When I say there's 24 sworn officers, that's patrolmen, sergeants, lieutenants, and captains. Ideally, we want to have at least 4 people on the road at any given time, and that's what drives that staff. That's what drives that discussion. So with 3 shifts, you have 4 patrolmen, and then you have their supervisors and the others. That's how that kind of adds up.
Is there any kind of mandate for the state, how many you're supposed to have per?
You know, I don't think there is.
Another county, I think 1,500 people, supposed to have definitely serve 1,500 people. Of course, we got 2 to 3 times the amount we need in the county right now. So when you take in some of this property here, if you do it, then we might be able to do with 1 or 2 less deputies in the county at that point.
Well,
Well, it sounds like you got plenty to take care of town right now.
well, I'll say, yeah, the sheriff's office is patrolling in town right now too, so.
Is there a plan to increase your staff?
We're-
$12 million building that you're providing?
Oh, no, thank you for bringing that up. It's not related, the building proposal is just based on the fact that the basement is 50 years old and we're kind of cramped. Now, that goes to the argument of how many officers do we need? But, the planning for a new building or improvements of any kind will be based on a staffing level. We are building in the possibility of adding officers, but I will tell you that's not a discussion that we've had at the council level of actually doing it. If we build something new, mainly is, if we build something new, we don't want to build something that is obsolete. If that makes sense, because I was talking to CG earlier, when we occupied this building in '68, I think we had 8 officers. But that's a great question.
Just an observation, your site plan looks very short on parking already. And as a prospective town taxpayer, the devil's in the details.
Absolutely.
I kind of need to know.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that. So where we are on that is we're in the design phase, and Wiley Wilson's who's working on that, they reached the midpoint of their design. What we did was we asked for some help to look at what they're proposing and see how we pay for it. I'm just gonna be honest. I mean, we don't have $12 million in the bank, obviously, so.
I'm glad you're aware.
Yes. First off,
I don't either.
I'm
Or
gonna,
a percentage thereof.
I'm gonna tell you a little bit about my discussions with Wiley Wilson.
I got sure they're gonna spend it.
I sat down with them when they first started showing us design, and I asked the chief, Shannon Walker, and I met with them, and there were a couple of elements in there, and I asked them, I said, are these structural, or are these architectural, or are these trying to win an award? And I'm telling you publicly about a private meeting I had. My direction to the architect was, we need something functional, but we're not looking for anything pretty. I'm not saying we put up an ugly building. What I'm saying is, we don't really want to pay for an AIA award-winning project,
Exactly.
but we don't want Stalinist Russia either.
As the county has in multiple school buildings.
Yeah. So we're sensitive to that. And Wiley Wilson, we're gonna have them come talk to council and present in detail what their proposal is. My personal opinion is there's still some cost engineering to do on that. But that's my personal opinion. I didn't ask for it.
Have y'all considered changing the site location of that yet?
Everything's on the table at this point. We've looked at a couple of other existing buildings, and
I don't necessarily mean this building, just the site location, so like I told you down there on Orange Street, you got, if y'all still own that lot down, that's Piedmont Metal Product.
yeah,
That's where they were planning on doing it when it was a city, and that's the best ideal location for it, because you got room for expansion for the fire department, fire rescue, and everything. If y'all do it down in Palmer's Hill, you ain't gonna have what you need when you get finished.
for those of you who might not know what Tony's talking about, I am familiar. Well, one of the reasons we're looking at the Bottom Hill is because we owned it. We're thinking, so but there's a piece of property at the intersection of Independence and Orange, and if you're going towards the railroad crossing, it's that northeastern quadrant. I know once upon a time the city owned that, because when I was the planning director, I was told to develop a sketch for possibly a combination fire and police department structure. That obviously didn't happen, and at some point, prior to my tenure in this position, the decision was made to sell that as surplus property. I'm not sure who owns it now.
It is that, Bill,
That's
maybe
right.
that's, no, maybe don't have one.
Gentry. Glenn Gentry.
I was thinking Oscar might have been involved at some point.
Oh,
Well, they did.
Glenn Gentry.
They did
That's
some
his name.
land swapping there with Oscar, the town did, to get that over there on the other side of Orange.
Yeah, you're right.
It was high. But whoever did that deal, I've been smacked in the head. Or that was like,
Hindsight's 20/20.
And I'm not going to cast aspersions on my predecessor.
Another thought is Independence. Independence Park. There's a wonderful functional building that CBCC keeps saying they
Ah.
can't afford.
Yeah,
Every
that,
time a lease comes up for that. But there's some sites in there, which are central.
yeah, now,
it's like 5 or 6 lots in that building.
Yep. And the town EDA is anxious to have a tenant. Or not.
The only bad thing about that is the one on where Orange and Independence, more visible, more central, it's easy to get in. and
But
out of.
it's also more valuable commercially, they don't need a commercial
Well, I
location.
understand, yeah, I agree with you.
no, we do appreciate that input, and this is the kind of discussion we really enjoy having. Tony? Yes.
Has there been any thought or discussion of actually polling the residents of this phase 2 area where they get to
ordinarily, in annexation in Virginia, you have to go through a more extended process. This was the incentive offered to the city then. Let me explain something to you that's probably really gonna make you irate. The only thing the town really needs to do to take you in is adopt an ordinance. We really aren't even required to have a public hearing, although I hope everybody will join me in giving credit to council that you absolutely have to. So that's a procedural thing, and that's what we're working through here. And I know that's probably not a popular thing, and I want you to hear, but it is true. Yes, sir.
You recently adjusted the boundaries. Can you adjust them again to take North Hills out of the equation?
I think it's possible to adjust those boundaries right up to the point the ordinance is adopted.
Then we get to two important questions. There was a nice presentation of all the services you have, but at this moment, there's really none that I need that I'm not getting. What is the advantage to me as a homeowner if we become part of the town? And secondly, what is the advantage to who? Who's benefiting from this to be pushing this?
I'm really not qualified to answer your first question. That's going to be subject to each individual property owner, and we really want to hear from all of you.
Everybody in North Hills, I'm sure.
Yeah, and we have heard that, but we've got what we need and we're not interested.
I guess from your end, the town is built out. There's physically no way for you to.
There's not a lot of area to grow.
Right. I mean, even back when I was doing my demonstration report and using the property account, it was virtually impossible to find single-family lot sales because there aren't. So in order for the town to continue to grow and grow their tax coffers, there has to be more land taken. I understand that part. I don't like it, but I understand.
I don't think I can say that any better than Christie just did.
You know, the other setback about it is creating more lot. You know how much PSA gets for water and sewer?
Well, you want to talk about smacking somebody in the head without the reason.
Oh, yeah.
Frank, he's a nice guy, but
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I noticed that you indicated that they were not going to take into the boundary that part behind Elk's home.
Yes,
And
we're
there was
right.
also a proposal for 300 units being built back there, and that was set aside. What's the impact of the proposal
That,
in regard to that?
that proposal, I think, is, Mary, am I right on the map here where that is? It's right around here.
it was not in that area.
Well, it's within the town limits now.
It's currently in town.
It's behind the old Elks home. The status of that proposal is it was withdrawn and,
It was tabled for issues related to infrastructure.
Okay.
It's basically farm property out there.
yes.
And you don't farm it.
One of the comment, Art, is that I've been told that the first wave of reversion on 460 West, the infrastructure had not been extended to the Rhino, if you will, or Wheaton Road, because there was insufficient demand. I find that to be incorrect based on Dollar General, Trailers Unlimited, and the new and improved commercial activity that we see there. However, when I was directed by Mayor to the Water Authority, they never got back with me.
I was about to ask where that information.
They never, no. And at that time, they would have had to extend sewer from the Y, the back of the Y. And I know there has been another proposed commercial development that would require a mile of sewer. Because it's in a meeting that would, and, a mile of sewer from the water authorities. I can buy all of that and do that.
At the very next meeting, we're gonna have a discussion with the water authority about these kinds of issues, because in addition to Town and Country, we also funded a few other projects. And this was,
But that was grant money, but you funded.
that was grant money. However, the point about the quantity and quality of available sewer service on the west side of town there is a conversation that we're having very often with the Water Authority. We're gonna talk about this publicly Tuesday, so I'll just go ahead and say it. One of the biggest issues is there's a pump station on Nichols Road, which is back here. That is the outfall for darn near everything on the west side. And they know they have issues with it. And we know that because when we were still in the business, we had issues with it. And what we're trying to do is get the Water Authority to address that. And I think we're making some progress there. We're interested, but that's what we hear as well when we get development proposals. There is I guess there's a permit on George's property, isn't there?
They're working out the final details.
Okay, and I can't say that. George has Napoleon's property, which is called Harmony, which is right here.
Right, I'm familiar with Harmony, but if you go further, the last two commercial, properties that were developed were there, and they were placed there because they're sewer.
We'll
One
let that,
being Trailers Unlimited, the other being Dollar General.
The Plus is on a drain field, they didn't have.
But they did not have one because of the inability to deal with it.
Dollar General too.
Because it's there.
See, that's another thing, we talked about having a lawyer property when that project started, it was supposed to be a complete project, 10 years.
that's
And
right.
I told them, that the zoning meeting and everything else is never happened. What's that?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up too. In this property here, this was taken as phase one. We're talking about across from Super 8, everybody's probably familiar with it, but it's a large piece of vacant property that's owned by a gentleman, George Asnavori, and we're mentioning by name because we know him personally. Right around the time we were going through reversion, he got approval to build I'm gonna call it a multi-use project, which has, how many, 300 houses? At least 300 residential units.
Like 175 townhouses.
It's a bunch.
40, 50 homes or something.
And then-
I told them it never happened.
Well, and then reversion happened and he came into the town and I think the Army Reserve Center came in after that.
Brokers looking, that there's a cigarette tax in the town, and they said, absolutely.
Anyway, George, and I don't want to speak for George, but my understanding is he's been trying to get some things going there, but has had some issues with infrastructure. We have entered that part of the discussion as well.
To go further, you took those people in, you need to give them the services.
Well, they moved up to PSA, Brian, if it ain't got nothing to do
If
with.
they don't have
forestry,
any
what?
authority
Brian,
over the water authority, there's an issue with the
Come to the meeting,
operation.
come to the meeting on Tuesday night.
Hey, I'll go to his meeting and tell him.
No comment.
But, you know, it's just, it's ridiculous the way a lot of things get done.
I follow it, you know, that Mr. Kedwig, that you had asked who benefits, the real estate tax revenue would be about $400,000. But what Mr. Clater is saying is right. If we take in this area, and we take your tax money, we need to provide service. We have to. That's,
It's just gonna put you in the negative.
And like I said, it's numerous places on that first.
Yes.
It's numerous places on that
We-
first.
we don't think it will.
$400,000 increase in taxes,
that's the revenue impact.
revenue. Have you priced concrete?
Oh, yeah.
Where's my bar?
What we,
$8 a month, $8 a yard increase.
well, I'll tell you, if the next sidewalk project we have to do, we're probably gonna use a VDOT revenue sharing grant. Our share will be 20%, VDOT will be 80%.
You only got 400,000.
Yeah, it depends, now the devil's in how much you do with that, you're right.
And the other thing is, I mean, y'all used to put out bids every year on these jobs, and y'all, the last one you did, I think you gave the guy a 2 year, 3 year, 4 year contract. That's what he was saying. I found out it wasn't 2 years. You need to go back and get these things done every year and get dependable people, so when they start the job, they stay on the job and they get the job completed. They don't start it and drag it out for a whole year before it gets completed, and you got messed for that amount of time.
I agree, I will tell you, we're having some struggles with procurement. It's not the money, it's getting the people who can do the work.
But you had one under contract that was supposed to have been able to do the work, and he couldn't perform and get the work done in a timely manner. And you need to start putting some stipulations on these things, give them a time frame that they're comfortable with. If they're not, they need to start getting fined for not getting finished.
It's called performance bond.
Exactly.
We need more fish in the net to begin with too, though, that's,
So Bart, while we're on sidewalks,
yeah.
gutters and curbs, the Bedford code section, Bedford town, section 50-78 says that, construction of sidewalks, curbs, and gutters upon applications of property owners. A says, in all incidents in which application is made for the construction of sidewalks, curbs, and gutters in the town, the property owner shall pay for 1/2 of the total estimated cost of construction of the sidewalks, curbs, and gutters abutting to the property, the estimated cost being determined by the town. Also says that no such construction would be, this is D now, construction would be started until 100% of the property owners of the front footage in a block shall be made applied for, and until the respective property owners shall have paid their proportion parts of the total estimated cost in full.
That describes a process whereby, I'm speaking hypothetically, you and your neighbors don't have a sidewalk and you petition us to do it.
We don't have a sidewalk.
No, I mean, yeah, hypothetical. And if that is outside of our current capital plan where we're planning to get anyway, and again, our plan is to get to you anyway, if you want it, but if you were trying to do something outside of what we were doing, you have the right to go through that and ask us to do that, but you've got to pay parking costs. That's what that ordinance says, but yes, that's correct. That's in instances where, and I don't know that we're talking about today, you really, really want them and you're willing to do it hypothetically, not you personally.
Now, which you know.
The other thing and Mikey brought this thing the other day, I think it's probably worth repeating. With sidewalks comes some responsibilities for the adjacent homeowners, and 2 things I'm gonna tell you about is when it snows, there is an ordinance that says you have a certain length of time to clear the snow from your sidewalk, or I think it's misdemeanor. Well, this year none, but it'll probably come next month if I said that.
But you're mandated,
But you are, if you have a
24 hours after.
I will tell you how we go about this, and that, what I've been doing since I'm town manager is we kind of keep it on the scale of the snowstorm. If the snow's so deep that nobody's really got any business being out there, we don't really want to force anybody to walk on a sidewalk that we don't want to use it.
But the example I used
Yeah, that's,
yesterday was Amy's mom and dad lived at 1529 Oakwood Street. A senior citizen is the most law-abiding person there is, in my opinion. And he knew he had 24 hours
I know.
after that snow. He wanted his sidewalk driveway shoveled because he could get in trouble for his sidewalk. He couldn't get in trouble for his driveway. We can't see, because they understand the law, they hear the law, they know that town ordinance says they got 24 hours. They think, but now we've got senior citizens out there, or they're having to pay somebody to do this. It just,
We need to revisit that law for sure. Because again, that's a practical issue.
You got the same thing about mowing.
I was gonna bring that up, thank you. I live on Bedford Avenue. If you've got a grass strip, it's your responsibility to mow that. You'll see me out there. I bought a separate battery powered thing because it was easier than doing anything else.
They bust you for it.
No, I stay ahead of it. What I'm saying is, and maybe it's people who are doing it deliberately, I darn near get killed by the traffic whizzing by. I don't like that one either personally, so I'd like to revisit that one. But those are in the town code, yes.
Well, it's something, as far as the snow on sidewalks, as long as I've been living, I ain't never known them to ever enforce that.
And I'm gonna tell you I haven't been enforcing, I'm just gonna be honest about it. For that reason, I really don't want anybody doing it and having a heart attack, for Pete's sake, and that's kind of a judgment call. If we have a snow, generally what I'll tell people is like, we'll issue an amnesty for this and that. I'm sorry, Tom.
Another thing that, like, I know vision is good on this, but, the practicality of the sidewalks that, going out really late, park and so forth. I drive that way every day for work, and I can't say that pedestrian traffic has increased on those sidewalks. And being out there, people are gonna be driving to there instead of walking. And if they did walk, they walked in the grass. So, the money that was spent on those sidewalks, and then the sidewalk going to the D-Day Memorial, I heard, or, that far, I heard that they were hoping that would be for people wanting to walk, out to the, but if you think about it, the ones who visit D-Day Memorial, they're coming in buses and all, very few. So we need to really look at, are these sidewalks being used? They're down now, we spent all this money on them, but are they practical, were they really needed? Because I understand that project was pretty big.
Yes, and that was a VDOT revenue sharing program.
Well, that was the pay for grant, but the one going out Peach Street, 43 was paid by the city. Right?
That was a town capital
Yeah,
project.
which was total waste of money.
Yeah, Mr. Kelly.
I have a friend who lives in town, probably can see it out the window here. And across the street, there was a house that was in terrible disrepair, no crack house, people coming and going all day and night. And he repeatedly went to people on the town council, to the police, and everybody said, we can't do a thing. All right, now that's the service you'd like me to pay higher taxes for and bring it to my community. I'm not interested, thank you.
Well, I'd like to have more information from you privately about that because I don't want
Let's go another one.
that.
Driving into Bedford, a lot of people come from Lynchburg, and look at the corner up there by Food Lion. It's being cleaned up a little bit now, but for 10 years that we've lived here, it's an absolute eyesore, and nobody can do anything. So now you're gonna bring that level of service to my community. Thank you very much, but no thank you.
Well, I can address that. We have a property maintenance code. Let me back up. The building code requirements are pretty minimal. And for a vacant building, basically the building code says you have to keep it secure so it doesn't fall on somebody. So that's the base level of the building code that we have. We also have a property maintenance code that's a little bit more than that. That says, okay, beyond just boarding it up, it can't be blighted, it can't have an impact. The challenge we have, it's kind of similar, maybe it's not. I was going to say the snow thing, that's really different. We're trying to balance the interest of the private property owners by kind of forcing them and mandating some things with the effects of blight. Sometimes that takes longer than we'd like to, but, on the Fulton's gas station out there, yeah, I don't think it's been open since I moved here. And it's sat there for a while, and I think reasonable people would say it looked pretty bad. What I will tell you though is with the use of our property maintenance code and with some other incentives we have, that is being redeveloped, and you should see something brand new when?
They, I can contest to that. They was working on that, been working on it for almost 2 years. But they had to go through the court system and everything to get it done.
There were extenuating circumstances.
Yeah, it was owned by a family, and then there were some issues with.
State and,
But your point's well made. I mean, and the perception of a lot of blighted properties in Bedford is something we've been working to address, and we've been fortunate to attract some developers who will take on some of these old buildings. The most recent one is Chris Vale out of Roanoke, who did the 620, which is right here on the railroad tracks. The other one right across from that, which looks pretty rough. We've just hooked that property owner up with a grant that will allow them to revitalize that. But that process isn't as fast as we'd like it. But your point's well made.
and it's not just Bedford, it's in exactly that situation.
It just takes time. I will back them up on that. They have been working on it. They seem to try to stay on top of it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
But I want to ask again, who benefits from this adjustment?
The benefit to the town probably is in population gain. That's probably the most obvious benefit.
So it's taxes.
Well, we'll speed it. I said this Thursday and I repeat it, and maybe some of my bosses disagree with it. If we're gonna take your money, we need to provide you with a service, and I think Mr. Clater made the point, that needs to be a dollar for dollar kind of thing. So, we should not take your money and put it in the bank because it's your money, it didn't belong to us.
So that should be an overriding rule for all tax increases, but it hasn't worked yet. Oh, anyway,
we already have the services that you provide, other than sidewalks, we have all that we need. We have all that stuff that you're providing, we have it all already. Except for sidewalks, but nobody wants them. So why do we pay? So we're paying money for nothing. We're getting nothing in.
I got a few concerns about that. Some of the services, it is spring and fall cleanup,
Yes.
monthly brush cleanup. But do you not get those services if you don't have the trash picked up?
Oh,
I was told one time that I wasn't paying the trash pickup, I didn't get those services, and I called BS on it. Well, so I got it straightened out, so they do come do the fall, spring and fall cleanup and brush cleanup. But $25 supposed to be for trash, not the other.
yeah, I think the spring cleanup is paid for out of general fund, isn't it? So, that, if you're paying, that's paid by tax dollars, you're entitled.
But I had an
Thank you
issue-
for bringing that up.
I had an issue several years ago, of course, I got it straightened out. But there again, no, I don't want you taking mine in, I don't want to pay no extra taxes, because I don't need the extra services, it's unnecessary. And I think it's to y'all's benefit not to do it, but I know you want to do it, and like I said, the general consensus with your council members, they slobber to get their money. And I just think it's a bad idea.
So it's not, let's think about past. We're right here, and it's the seven that's set here is gonna make that decision on May the 9th, is what they're gonna make. So we can either stop it, or we can move it forward. Or I should say, we can postpone it, is what we end up doing. Thursday night, when my sister and I drove up here, the Shell station, right there, the Fulton's, right there at the intersection, gas was $2.99. When we left here, gas was $3.19. That was an hour and a half. You know, and that's where I spoke about economic downturn, that we're all in right now, and there's nothing positive in this, other than the town gets 450,000 was the comment, Thursday night, is they get those taxes, but it's falling back on the taxpayer. And we're not getting anything for that 29 cents that we don't have already, other than we might get a sidewalk and some street lights, but in the future, is what we might get. So,
Has it also been looked at like the poverty level of Bedford? Because, you know, putting taxes on those stuff is just gonna make the cost of living so much harder for those folks. But I always thought, hey, Bedford's a pretty, you know, well town, but honestly, when you see cars people are driving, you know, they got duct tape and, you know, shop and get groceries and, you know, but I think that was when you look at as well, with the poverty level, what they're looking for.
This was set up prior, like, back in 2013, it was set up then. If you really look at things, just don't see what season it's in. Either now or in the future.
as I said Thursday, I came in from work, I turned on to Independence, the Church of God across from CVS had the cars wrapped around it. You know, people asking for food. And what we hear is it's the largest it's been. Is what it is. You know, I know this winter, one of the local churches had to do a
Shelter.
warming station because we have homeless people in the town right now. And I think it's showing positive.
Yeah, I work at a church, and I'm forever getting phone calls from folks asking for assistance with electric bill, whether I have their lights turned off and so forth. And we don't have the means to get individuals, we always get monthly to the Christian ministry. And they're like, well, we've already, you know, kind of maxed out with the services they provide. So they're really hurting, you know, and I just,
The economy was better in 2013. A whole lot worse now.
I can kind
Yes, sir,
of
Mr.
about
Collins.
that situation everybody's speaking of. I've been retired for 23 years, and my Social Security does not go up enough to cover these additional taxes.
Let's start doing it now.
I can't afford to, I gotta move back, so I can't afford to keep taxes over what I already have.
Can you imagine Mr. Thomas' salary 23 years ago compared to today? So he's having to live off a salary still 23 years later with what he's never had. Like Mr. Thomas says, his pay raises aren't much anymore. And that, if you look at the people that you're trying to bring in, the citizens, most of them are retired citizens, is what they are. I know on our stretch of 221, you got more retirees than you do have working, is what you have. So they're basing their salary, their income, as Mr. Thomas is 23 years ago. It's not what it was today. So,
When the state saying about them, we're going to pay more.
right, exactly. And so we're doing this to our own neighbors, is what we're doing. We're hitting our own neighbors, is what we're doing. Neighbors shouldn't treat neighbors this way.
Well, the other thing is we got hurt on this new assessment, so when we done it,
Yeah.
I mean, I went up there and I complained, I had 15 properties that was just outrageous. And I complained about all 15 of them. One of them had dropped like 30,000, one of them had dropped $1,000, and another one
it's based on the 29 cent applied to that. Yeah.
I'm just pointing out.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought up the reassessment part, because I think it was about a 30% increase in our property value. And so we haven't felt the pain of that yet, because we've already paid, for 2022. So this will be in June, and I haven't figured out how much it's going to be, but it's going to be quite a bit more based on this new, assessed value. So we haven't gotten to that point yet of knowing how much that's going to be. So we're gonna have that extra to pay in taxes, period, and then on top of, adding the town tax as well. So it's gonna be a big.
Yes.
I got one question on that one too. On the town tax, if we are involved in this increase, when would that be effective?
I think we get the bill in January.
December fifth, second half of
Okay.
So it would still be
October.
the half of this year.
Yeah, October, November, you would receive the town bill, and it would be due December fifth.
But would it be for half of the year?
Yes,
Okay.
it would.
Is anything good you can tell us about?
There apparently, I wanted to tell you about some developments that were coming in town that ideally would take some of the burden off the residential property owners, but apparently I can't say anything publicly about those,
Well, I mean, I hope you are getting something, but,
Yeah.
but there's gonna be limited areas for those to go in,
That's
right? And some of this stuff that you're taking in, they're not gonna go right. I wouldn't think, I could be wrong, think.
No, I'm aware of some developments coming down the pike, but
And then, the
I
other
can't say anything about those.
That's up to you, we just have been pulled for the one large one.
So I can say the name. Okay, the fact that you didn't say yes,
Probably not.
I'm sorry. I spent a lot of time Thursday apologizing, I'll do it again. Look, I don't think I can tell you anything you want to hear, Tony. I'm just going to be completely candid with you. I really wish I could.
See,
Yeah, on Harmony Development, right out here on the west end of town, across from Super 8 and all that.
part of the problem here is with providing services and stuff like that. Especially when it comes to water and sewer, your hands are tied, it's really got no food. I mean, he's his own man, or John, what he says goes, is pretty much the way I feel, reading all this here. You have to really come down on a real hard where you had to provide it, or had to have a real emergency or excuse to have it before he could do it. It's my opinion. And I got a feeling that just like you took them people out of the hospital, they would want sewer out there, at least I would want it, but the majority of those people would want it. And it may come a time down the road, I'll be dead gone by then, that you may have to put it out there. Because over the years,
Oh, with drain fields,
drain fields
I enjoy it.
fail, then you ain't got no room to expand or nothing like that, so, down the road, it would have to happen. Wouldn't be no choice, like I said, I wouldn't do it.
I guess what I will tell you though is staff has challenges we're trying to address, and part of that is attracting some growth that will offset some things, and it's probably not even worth talking about that, but I can't tell you exactly what that is though.
We can tell us a little later, yeah.
And, all these challenges, I'm taking notes about this, and I'm gonna incorporate that into this, saying what we've heard today, and put down, it's our challenge to provide you the level of service that meets your expectations. Now, the hard part about that, first off, is determining your expectations, but I'm gonna try real hard to do that because, well, like I talked to you about something else you have going on, we are concerned, we do hear you, and
Well,
we're prepared to address it.
and that's what I said, council people a month ago, you need to get your infrastructure stuff done, that's already started, but you can't finish it, that stuff is pretty first. And then take
I know, that's the
That
projection.
was the basic thing of it was, because they couldn't take in no more land and create no more money. That's one of the
If
reasons
we-
why they done it.
I will say this, and again, this is Mark Warner's opinion, if we had not reverted, we were heading in a bad direction. Part of that is, the city was landlocked, we didn't have much growth, we just lost our biggest employer, and didn't have a lot of ability to get that back. The other thing too was, well, let me speak to this, and you all may have heard this, but let me explain it. If you're an independent city, that means you've got to provide certain services that the state mandates, like schools, courts. There's a number of them. What I will tell you is the city of Bedford never really did that. We had contracts with the county for the provision of those, but we still had, compared to today, an additional 60% of expenditures compared to what we do. I think our general fund last year as a city was like $18 million. The current year it's $10 million, but again, that's because of a grant we got, so. We got rid of about half of our expenditures through reversion, which that was another reason why we could argue that that was a good thing. But where we are now is, okay, we're on our own, we need to kind of sink or swim. And, yeah, the challenge is before us. I say that, we're on our own, we still receive some incentives related to reversion. I mentioned earlier, I don't want to make light of it, the county gives us $750,000 for another 5 years, which we really appreciate. What we're trying really hard to do though is make sure we're not using that for operations and we're not dependent on it.
Don't look like a school board.
Yeah. One thing I'll tell you, and this goes to Mr. Kedwick's question, the 750 target, 450 will help us get there, but if we did it that way, you won't see any obvious benefit. And again, those are the challenges we're looking at. I really wish I could give you some good news. That's really bad.
Well, we know something's coming.
More to come.
Yeah.
And I'd be grateful for something. Like I said, we need more businesses to come in here. These little antique shops ain't good. You know, we got plenty of them, don't need no more, them ain't dined up, they keep opening up every day. And, you know, we need some type of small industry in here to provide more jobs and more revenue and stuff like that. We just, I don't know why we can't get some of this. I mean, it's going to Danville and Charlottesville, it's going everywhere else, but it almost seems like ain't nobody pulling from Bedford. I'm hoping you are, but it's almost like somebody not pulling from Bedford.
That one I know. Okay, let me give you a little bit of good news on that front. Another business we lost was Rubitex, and yeah, this is out here. I'm sorry, well, no, I call it Rubitex because when I moved here, it's a while. But, they went out of business 2020. They were a good employer. When I say they were a good employer, they paid a really good wage. Those of you not familiar, they were aligned with the steel industry. What they did was they took little ball bearings and made them smaller ball bearings, and that was in demand. And that's another case where that company was owned by an international firm that closed during COVID. Actually, I remember that. And I think what we found out was the decision to close was made by somebody in Canada who didn't consult somebody in France. Look, that doesn't matter. The end result is it impacts us. Since that time, the EDA is working, and they just got a grant, and it was announced this week, to put some reinvestment in that and make that a training center for steel production. And that's in conjunction with Virginia Tech, CVCC. And what that will bring us, we hope, is existing businesses in there, like Banker Steel would use that.
There are a number of metal industries in Roanoke and Pittsburgh regions.
The idea is if we can get them here to use this training facility, we can start to capture more of them on the ground. Again, if part of the strategy is if you've got an existing business and it has, I'm gonna call them allied businesses or suppliers, if you can get them, you can get their suppliers too. So that's been announced. That's hopefully you view that as good news, and that's something I can share with you. Those are the kind of things we do have coming down.
Are y'all doing that in conjunction with people still on the building?
owns the building,
No, not yet.
is about to close on the building.
So the EPA is going to buy.
Yes. And, well, Christie left, Bedford Center for Business, I should probably want to say, they came really close on getting a tenant out of kind of the end of the cul-de-sac there, so they're plugging too. We are trying, I don't want to be somebody that promises you it's going to be better tomorrow, but what I am telling you, we do have some things we're working on that we think can demonstrate results. I just can't tell you because just of their privacy until they get their permit. Now, will that completely offset what's going on in the economy? I'm not gonna make that guarantee to you either. Again, we're trying to do what we can to make sure we can swim instead of sink and hopefully you are seeing a little bit of that. It's residential development mainly, but 620, some of the redevelopment of these old buildings, I mean, that's good and we hope that attracts. And I don't want to generalize too much, but we haven't talked about too much about our demographics beyond, poverty level, but we need some younger folks in here too. And some of these things, look, I don't know. I don't understand how those things work, but I see that younger folks are attracted to them, and if that works, that's great.
Younger folks don't work no more. Make 30 years old or younger, they don't work no more. So I don't know, but don't rely on them.
Well, I got a 20-year-old that I'm hoping breaks that trend. Because I need him to support me.
Good luck with that.
So, anything else at all? Anything at all you want to ask about or talk about? And if you think about something later, please come by and see me. Let me know. I'll be happy to hear it.
Well, all right, another thing.
Okay.
If you did curb it and gutter it, I'd just say pass hot road. Of course, if you did it in town and country, that's hot road. But if you did curb it and gutter it, then you got to line, go, water run off everything.
We do have to maintain what we put in.
You're gonna have to, I mean, just think about which one I spend.
And glad you mentioned that because I want to be transparent about that too. We've got to maintain what we've got. And you can walk outside right now and probably see sidewalks that are showing aggregate that we probably need to address sooner than later. So you're right. The good,
I was right on it. Thank you.
the thing about that is we receive a good deal of funding from VDOT that we need to use. Again, that's a matter of getting people in to get the work done. We know it needs to be done, we need to get it done. And that's not new or planned things, that's what we've got. Yeah, it's fun to be us.
I can't think of anything.
Well, again, thank you all so much. Let me say this too, I didn't say it Thursday night, but since we're recording, I hope people here. I'm gonna go back to, I know you're aggravated about this, to say the very least. I get that. I appreciate the fact that you've been so respectful in sharing that information with us. I mean, to Mike's points, I mean, we are all neighbors here and we're in the same boat, so I live here, I love this place, I want to see it succeed. And I know you do too, based on the fact that you came out here on the Saturday. So thank you very much. That's great, and I really do appreciate it.
And you're welcome. I've been here Thursday, but I forgot.
Well, you can
I
watch
was
it.
reminded this morning, I something wrong. It won't go well, I won't get Thursday.
What? I'm glad you were able to come.